Hello and welcome to a tour of the Blythewood Historical Society and Museum. We are so glad you could join us today through this video, and we hope your next visit will be in person. The museum is located in the small town of Blythewood, South Carolina, north of the state capital of Columbia. Dedicated to telling the history of the local community, this museum covers a variety of topics and has an interesting assortment of artifacts. We begin the tour here in the front lobby. These panels detail the early history of Blythewood. The town began as a small train stop in 1849. It had a large water tank to supply the steam-powered train, and originally it was named Doco. As in many areas of South Carolina, the train stop attracted families, and by the 1860s, this area was home to several houses, a post office, a church, and the Blythewood Female Seminary. Agriculture was the main economic engine for the state, and cotton was the main crop. It required a huge labor force, which was made up of generations of enslaved African Americans. The Civil War, which ended in 1865, finally put an end to slavery in the South, but most freed slaves and white Southerners continued to farm, often as tenant farmers or sharecroppers. Farming was the main occupation of residents in and around Blythewood. The train took the cotton and other crops to markets and provided passenger routes as well. It took goods to local stores, and the train depot became the lifeblood of this small town. In 1877, town residents voted to change the name from Doco to Blythewood, and the town incorporated 2 years later. The train room at the Blythewood Historical Society and Museum features a replica of the depot that was built in 1903, a model train set and a large mural by local artist Harold Branham. He depicts the view from the train as passengers were coming to town in the early 1900s. Other items in this room include a set of scales used at the depot and its telegraph machine. This machine used wires stretched along the railroad lines to communicate to other cities and states. As we come back into the lobby area, we see the original owner of this historic house, the Langford family. Built around 1904 for Luther and Carrie Langford, this house was a folk Victorian style with a front porch on Main Street and a side porch. And this was the side porch located here. It was enclosed in the 1980s when the house was used as a shop. Shop owner Cindy Nord donated the house to the Historical Society in 2011, which makes this the Langford-Nord house. From this porch, Luther Langford could have looked out and seen the store that he ran with his brother. One of the few commercial buildings constructed in Blythewood in the early 1900s, the Langford Brothers store is located on Main Street, also known as Highway 21. More businesses followed in the 1920s through the 1960s. Outside of town, the JJ Ranch opened in the 1950s. It had rodeos and summer camps and generated a lasting legacy of horse culture in the Blythewood area. The Blythewood Historical Society and Museum uses this area for programs and meetings. As we tour this space, you'll see a variety of topics and artifacts about local history. For much of its history, the town did not have any fire department. Residents would rally together to fight a fire. Blythewood finally gained a volunteer fire department in the early 1970s. Likewise, the town did not have a police force when a series of robberies in the 1920s included the Langford Brothers store. The thieves used nitroglycerin to blow the safe and make off with $4,000. Illegal homemade corn whiskey, or moonshine, became popular during the Prohibition years of the 1920s, and Blythewood residents built hidden distilleries in the woods to evade law enforcement. Black and white bootleggers continued to make moonshine into the 1960s. Agricultural fairs, sports, church, and school events helped contribute to the sense of community here, But the post office provided a daily local spot to catch up on news. Postal carriers also traveled dozens of miles to deliver mail each day to the farms that surrounded the town in the early 1900s. This replica of an early post office was built by local Jim McLean. This large cabinet, donated by Cindy Nord, resided in the local train depot for many years. Churches were the bedrock of the community for much of its history, and the oldest is Sandy Level Baptist Church, built in the 1850s. Listed here are some of the enslaved members of the church who worshiped from the mezzanine area that still exists in the church today. After the Civil War, freed slaves formed Bethel Baptist Church, which is located not far from the museum. Segregated schools served Blythewood students until integration in the year 1970. This panel shows the different school buildings and students, teachers, and principals who were so important to the local educational system. Some of the students from these schools went on to serve in the military. In fact, Blythewood was represented in World Wars I and II, the Korean War, and the conflict in Vietnam. Some of our local veterans are represented here. If you know of some more, please let us know. Recent renovations, funded in large part by a grant from the Richland County Conservation Commission, allowed the museum to install a historic door and side lights back into this original front entrance of the Langford-Nord house. This helps return the building to more of a residential appearance, while this corner of the museum has a variety of household items that Blythewood residents used every day. We have a vintage washing machine, butter churns, a sewing machine, and an icebox. While most local women used these items regularly and worked as homemakers on family farms, Dr. Portia McKnight-Lubchenko took a different route. With an epic life story, she worked as one of the few female doctors in the state, serving Blythewood from the late 1910s through the 1920s. In earlier years, she had waited for a fiancé scheduled to arrive on the Titanic, but who had missed the ship's departure and arrived safely on another boat. And years later, they escaped another disaster together with their children when they fled the Bolshevik Revolution using the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Other notable locals are found here, and we are always looking to learn about people important to Blythewood's history. Let us know whom we should add. Before heading outside, you may want to visit the research room. An arrowhead collection shows the handiwork of some of the area's earliest residents. This room also has genealogy resources for researchers. In the back of the Langford-Nord house, we have a dairy house. It would have helped keep milk cool before residents had ice boxes or refrigerators. This was moved here in 2014 and dates to the early 1900s. Clara's Sandwich Shop, which originally was located along Main Street, opened in 1952 and operated until the late 1960s. The most popular menu item, the small fried fruit pie. Moved here in 2014, the shop's exterior has been restored to its original appearance. We hope you enjoyed a brief tour through the Blythewood Historical Society and Museum. Please join us in person for your next tour and visit our website for more information. We look forward to meeting you.